Day 10. The exercise remains the same till day 14. I'm reading 1,000 words every day to help improve enunciation and improve pattern recognition with the phrases that are supposedly supposed to help me to speak better. So, what we are going through is the problem with trying to optimize everything. This was completely, entirely written by ChatGPT. So, if it sounds AI-ish, don't mind it. Anyways, let's go. There is a point where trying to improve your life stops being useful and starts becoming another way of avoiding the things that actually matter. Improvement is generally a good thing. You can improve your health, your communication skills, your finances, your relationships, and the way you spend your time. The problem begins when improvement itself becomes the goal rather than a tool for building a better life. It is easy to fall into this trap because there is always something else you could improve. You could find a better morning routine, you could use a different productivity system, you could read another book, you could download another app, you could change your workout program, you could learn another skill. None of these things is necessarily bad. In fact, many of them can be useful. But when you constantly search for a better system instead of using the system you already have, improvement becomes a form of procrastination. The desire to optimize everything can also create the illusion that there is a perfect way to live. You start believing that if you can find the right routine, the right schedule, the right diet, the right environment, and the right set of habits, everything will eventually become easy. But life does not work that way. There are always going to be inconvenient circumstances. You will have days when you are tired. You will sometimes lose motivation. Unexpected problems will appear, plans will change, other people will make decisions that affect you. A system that only works when everything goes according to plan is probably not a very useful system. This is why simplicity can sometimes be more valuable than optimization. A simple routine that you can follow consistently is often more useful than a complicated routine that works perfectly but requires constant attention. For example, imagine two people who want to exercise regularly. One person spends weeks researching the perfect training program, comparing different exercises, calculating every detail, and constantly changing their routine. The other person, however, chooses to chooses a reasonable program and simply goes to the gym 3 times a week. The first person may know more about exercise, but the second person may actually make more progress. The difference here is not necessarily knowledge, it is execution. These principles applies to many areas of life. If you want to become a better writer, writing regularly will probably make writing regularly will probably matter more than finding the perfect writing software. If you want to become a better speaker, actually speaking will probably matter more than watching another video about communication. If you want to save money, constantly spending less than you earn matters more than finding the perfect budgeting application. The tools can help, but they cannot replace the behavior. There is also a psychological reason why optimization can become so attractive. Working on the system feels productive. You get the satisfaction of making progress without necessarily having to experience the discomfort of doing the actual work. Planning a difficult project feels easier than starting it. Researching how to exercise feels easier than exercising. Organizing your notes feels easier than studying. The activity looks productive from the outside and sometimes even productive from the inside. However, there is a simple question that can reveal whether you are improving your system or avoiding the work. Is this helping me do the thing, or am I using it to avoid doing the thing? That question is useful because it brings your attention back to the outcome. The purpose of a routine is to help you take action. The purpose of a productivity system is to help you complete meaningful work. The purpose of learning is to make you more capable. The system itself is not the destination. This does not mean that you should stop improving your methods. There are times when changing your approach is exactly what you need. If a routine consistently fails, it makes sense to examine why. If a strategy produces poor results, you should be willing to exchange it. The important distinction is between adjusting a system because it is not working and constantly changing systems because you are uncomfortable with doing the work. Those two behaviors can look almost identical from the outside. The difference, however, is the reason behind them. Sometimes the best decision is to stop looking for a better method and give the current method enough time to work. Consistency requires tolerating a certain amount of boredom. You may have to repeat the same workout. You may have to write about similar subjects. You may have to practice the same speaking exercise, but you may have to save money for a month. I'm going to repeat that. You may have to save money month after month without seeing dramatic changes immediately. None of this is particularly exciting, but progress is often built through activities that are repetitive precisely because they work. There is a strange tendency to assume that if something feels boring, it cannot be effective. In reality, boredom can sometimes be evidence that you have moved beyond the novelty of a new system and into the part where the results are actually created. Ultimately, the goal should not be to create a perfectly optimized life. The goal should be to create a life that works well enough for you to consistently do the things that matter. You need systems, but you also need the ability to operate without perfect systems. You need plans, but you also need the ability to act when the plan changes. You should improve your method, but you should also recognize when improvement has become an excuse to avoid execution. Sometimes the best system is simply the one you will actually use, and sometimes the next improvement you need is not a better system at all. It is simply doing the work. How did I do? I don't know how I performed there. That's roughly 1,000 words. I definitely had issues in some sections, and clearly some of the words were not properly pronounced. Anyways, I don't think it is bad. I have a couple of phrases here that I find interesting that I want to use in my day to day. Phrases like there is a point where the problem begins when it is easy to. This is why, for example, the difference is not necessarily X, it is Y. That's the framework I really like. It is not necessarily X, it is Y, or it is not particularly this. You get what I mean? I love it. I love those phrases. Anyways, the 10 has been, this challenge has been pretty exciting so far. I've been seeing some improvements. I no longer have to use a ton of filler words. I still do sometimes if I'm anxious, but I no longer have to use filler words whenever I'm trying to express myself. However, I still feel like thinking itself, thinking about the full sentence and just saying it out loud is quite daunting for me at this stage. I don't know what things is going to look like moving forward. However, I think I'm making improvements and I'm super excited to see what's going to happen by day 90. If you watch to the end, thank you for watching. And you can drop in the comments rice. That's a super random word. Drop in the comment rice.